Hey, Lauren.
Hi, it's been so long.
No, good to see you again.
You too. I'm excited for this.
Me too. This is fun. I wanted to ask you because I want to pace myself so I don't like just talk too much. How many examples do you have to share?
Um, oh my goodness. I just realized that I forgot to get any examples, Jonathan.
Oh,
Oh my
you're
God.
fine. I can. I've got some extras.
I don't know how I was so excited and okay. Well, thank you for covering for me. Oh, sorry.
I got geeked out and I overplanned, so that was I was like I'm just gonna make sure that I don't like hog that time,
Oh,
and so this works perfect.
okay. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Oh, I feel like so embarrassed. Like it's one of those moments like when you forget a homework assignment or something and you're like, oh my word, that was so important. That was like the major assignment. It was like, yeah.
No, this is going to be good.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So we've got a couple minutes before we start, and I see Patsy, Sheila, Zoe already starting to file in. But while folks are gathering, um, are there any things you want to make sure we get to or connect on today?
I think it was really great easing into everything that we did last time, and I think it would be again, I mean, I'm sure this is already kind of what we talked about, but like just sort of reviewing some of that because it's just kind of complex.
Yes,
And
I
then kind
have a. Sorry, go
of,
ahead.
and I was going to say, and then maybe even setting up some sort of questions, like what people are thinking about in preparation for the Wednesday night.
Yes. Oh yeah. I'm excited for Wednesday night.
Me too.
It just feels like a celebration with friends that we've been like gathering with, but not like gotten to talk with, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really looking forward to hearing what people have been experiencing, especially like at the different sort of levels of how long they've been exposed to this.
Yeah. We have among our new registrants, we have one or two who self-identify as threes on our little 1, 2, 3. How familiar are you scale? So I think that'll be interesting when we get into the Wednesday night conversation. We'll have a lot of folks for whom this is still very new, and then some more who geek out on it, and we'll be able to like just stir it all up.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's really great. That's really great. I actually had my friend that tuned in last time, and don't know that she can tune in today. But the four that I was telling you about, or I
Yeah.
had mentioned, she said that she had also heard something about America described as a 6 as well, which I thought was
Oh,
really
cool.
interesting. So I was kind of, it was fun to hear her thoughts about that. But you definitely like got her thinking too when you were talking about all that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, and it makes a lot of sense. And if you're just joining us, don't worry, you haven't missed anything. This is just our pre-show banter. So feel free to listen. And if you have questions or thoughts from last time that you want to share, we're going to make some time at the beginning for that. So feel free to throw those into the chat, and we'll just kind of collect those for a few minutes into our class. But right now, you have not missed anything. It's just Lauren and Jonathan bantering Enneagram. So you had just shared, Lauren, that one of your friends said she had also heard America described as a 6. We had talked last time about America being described as a 3, sort of the quintessential achiever. Both make a lot of sense to me, especially because they are part of the same triangle. So I forget which one. So if a 3 sort of in health goes to a, is that right? In health goes.
I'm trying to remember that one. I feel like I'm the least well versed in the 3 and maybe the 8. Just fewer people in my life that have that number, so I just haven't. Let's see. A 3 in.
Oh, so a three disintegrates to a 6.
Ah.
So no, disintegrates to a 9, integrates to a 6. So when America's at our healthiest, we pick up the qualities of a 6, which would be cool. That'd be good to know.
Yeah.
It gives us sort of a helpful place to imagine going with some of our less healthy pieces.
I do love. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, what time do you have?
It looks like 12:01 to me.
We should start. We'll continue the conversation, and so I'll throw it back to you so you can finish your sentence. But we should just move from banter to unofficial banter to official banter.
Perfect. No, all I was saying is I was just looking at this. It's so interesting. They give you examples of people who are your number. So that's really fun. There's like people that are like famous people or whatever. So it's kind of neat.
What's the most famous 7?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let's see here. 7. Oh, where all my highlights are. Let's see. Examples: Robin Williams, Steven Spielberg, Mozart, Jim Carrey, Goldie Hawn, Carol Burnett, Sarah Ferguson, Benjamin Franklin.
So a lot of funny people.
Yeah.
Not only funny people, but a lot of funny people.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Lucille Ball.
And Lucille Ball, oh, quintessential funny person. Funny and life embracing. I think of like Jim Carrey and Robin Williams is just, and not just funny too, right? But like Robin Williams and that incredible performance in Good Will Hunting, which I don't go back and rewatch as much as I used to because it's perfect in my mind. I'm sure it's still perfect. I just don't want to risk it. But having access to that emotional well also in health. Well,
it's interesting. Yeah, I sometimes think with acting, it's kind of what I do with music. It gives it a space to go that's less scary than like feeling it yourself. So, sorry, continue.
I was just going to say officially welcome to everyone who is with us today. We're really glad to have you with us and to be continuing this journey with you. This is the third in our conversation series. And so we're going to start off with a little bit of a review and then some questions. So if you're thinking of questions, please, we're going to have a couple of moments at the beginning. Feel free to fill that chat box and we'll check in with each other before we get into new stuff. But then the goal for today with the bulk of our time is to explore different applications of the type. So if we imagine the last 2 times is kind of putting each type under the microscope and maybe looking how the whole system as a whole fits under a microscope, now we're going to just try to see them in action. And we're going to look at some social applications too. And we've talked about sort of the difference of ideas of gender and how it translates into the conversation. We're going to look at a couple other applications. So social applications, types in action, and kind of beginning the transition to free-flowing conversation, which is Wednesday night, the celebration of this 4-part journey. So that's the roadmap. How are you today, Lauren?
I'm doing really well. I know we just talked about this, but for everyone listening, I'm super excited about Wednesday night when we get to hear all of your questions and see your faces. And I'm just really looking forward to that.
Yes, it's going to be fun. We should think of something to do, like wear party hats or like some way to celebrate.
I love that.
Maybe by the end of today's hour, we can have something cooked up. So as we go back and review, this is all pre-Enneagram. So before we ever talked about the Enneagram, we talked about some of these basic fundamentals, that there are at least 2 important things for connecting with other people as people who connect and are made for connection in the world. One is how we see the world, and the other is how we show up in this world. The things we notice, the things that we value, all of those inform kind of this, the things that we think are important about our own being when we show up as someone with the potential to connect. What difference do seeing and showing up make? What do they shape? They shape our patterns of attention, the things we notice, our habits of interaction, and what we think about is important. All those shape our ideas about our lovability. And then last time we included 5, I don't know why it dropped on this one, but also the things that inform how we think about what it means to be safe and how to be present to our survival needs. So those are all kind of underneath every Enneagram type, and also start to inform our understanding of what good the Enneagram can be for. It can help us understand our own hidden needs, our own hidden patterns. And it also can help us understand those who are different from us, because the Captain Obvious observation, oh, I thought I had it in there, I didn't. The Captain Obvious observation is that we all see the world a little differently, and we all show up to the world differently. So at the heart of the Enneagram, at least for me, is this kind of beginning of compassion, compassion with myself for those days where I get frustrated by my own patterns, and compassion for others when I find myself impatient with other people because they don't see what I see. There's so many conversations I've had with, especially in campus ministry, students who would be so righteously indignant that people didn't see what they saw. And I said, I would say, what if instead of, I mean, you're welcome to your feelings. I don't want to cut short that feeling, that righteous indignation, but instead of acting harshly on that feeling, what if you assumed that what you saw was the gift God had given you to give to the others, and that they have gifts too, that they are prepared and willing to give to you if we can create a community of generosity. So that's a large part of the gift and purpose of this, is to be able to see, receive, and give gifts, which is that the exchange of gifts is at the heart of relationship and the heart of friendship. So we looked at the 9 types. You'll remember that the words in italics here are the things that each type has a hard time with. And so those are not things to avoid. Those are the things that if each type can learn to go toward those things, a huge space of compassion, self-compassion, and ability to connect and relate on a different scale and a broader scale open up for each one. We talked about the different triads of feelings. So you have the anger triad, the 8-9-1. You have the shame triad, 2-3-4. And 6-7-5 over here is the fear triad. And one way to understand the 9 types is not as 9 types, but as 3 kind of underlying, very basic human emotions in interaction with each other. And then, Lauren, would you say something about what all these arrows mean?
Yeah. So all of the arrows are pointing to places of growth and then places of disintegration. So if you're in stress, as a 7, if you follow that arrow up to the 1, the perfectionist, the 7 would go to 1 in stress, but not the healthy part of 1. It would be the part of the 1 that is like the more unhealthy characteristics, like being judgmental or really, really black and white thinking, in a very rigid way, those kinds of things. And then if you look at where the arrow, the opposite way that it goes, the 7 in 5 is, or the 7 in growth goes to a 5, which means actually that you're going to the parts of the 5 that are healthier. And so that would be more like a 7 being less afraid of missing out on opportunities, being more confident with like observing a situation. And so with every number, you can follow it to wherever it's pointing in like strength, and then in stress, but just remembering that whichever number that leads to, it's the stress part goes to the unhealthy, and then the growth part goes to the healthier.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Did you want me to also say something about wings really quickly? I don't remember.
Oh yeah.
Cover that really?
Would you say something about wings?
Yeah. So I know last time we briefly mentioned that wings are the numbers that are on either side of whatever number you resonate with.
So
So
for example, if someone is a 3, their wings would be 2 and 4.
Exactly. And oftentimes, what I've learned is that that I believe that you have access. So like you, Jonathan, as a 9, you have access to both the 1 and the 8. But oftentimes, because balance is hard in life, we'll like lean one way or another. Yeah, and as a 7, it's interesting. I actually have that 6 wing that's stronger, because I tend to shy away from confrontation, and so that 8 wing is hard for me to lean into. Although it's nice when it pops up, but yeah. So whatever number you identify as, the numbers on either side, you do have access to those. And it's actually funny. I do feel like most of the time, those things help with balance. So for a 9, the peacemaker, some of those, the wings on either side may seem very different than the actual number itself. And I think that's helpful with balance sometimes.
It's so fun because like as a 9, one of the gifts is being able to see other people's positions charitably, and to help. They make great peacemakers or mediators because they can see the different stakes important to different people in a room, and hear things that people don't hear. But the blind spot is a 9 is not as able to say what is important to them in the conversation. That's what makes them the great mediator, but also like is this huge blind spot. It's like a superpower to be able to see other people's positions. But when I learned that I have access to an 8, which is a very intimidating number because 8s are the ones who are like always sure, sometimes right, kind of, and they're fine with that. Like they're okay with that. For a 9 to have access to that is like such a grace and a gift. It's just like having the windows open and there's all this air. It's like, wait a minute, I can do that. So there's a lot of range of emotional response available to each person. There's one other triad that we have not mentioned yet that I stumbled on, and it made a lot of sense to me because some of you have been asking about trying to figure out which number you are, like pinpointing, and it can be hard and it can be overwhelming. And we've kind of encouraged you just stick with the process and the conversation, because in the meantime, you hear about all the types, and if the point is connecting to people who are different, none of it is wasted. But this other one I found really, really helpful. So we've talked about, so this is the other triad set, and there's an assertive triad set, there's a withdrawn triad set, and there's a compliant triad set. And Lauren, I didn't say anything about this. This isn't really fair, but if you had to guess, who would you guess is in the assertive set or any of these sets?
So definitely like the 8 in the assertive,
Yeah.
And the 3.
Yeah.
The 1.
I think so. I don't actually remember. Oh, no,
Okay.
no. So 1 is not, but 8 and 3 are.
Okay. So maybe a 6. Wait. Oh, geez. This is hard.
I'll give you a clue. It's next to 8, and it's not 9.
It's the 7? That would have been the 1 that I wouldn't have
this
guessed.
is something that. So this is something that can account for some of our confusion, because I remember when I first found the Enneagram, I was like, I'm definitely a 5. Now, disclaimer: 9s think we're everything but 9s, because that's part of the curse of seeing other people's positions. But I definitely thought I was a 5, and I definitely thought I was a 4. And then I was confused if I was a 2. That makes sense too. But so 8, 7, and 3 tend to be more assertive. 9s, 5s, and 4s. You remember the 5 is the kind of stereotypical, well, not stereotypical. What is the proper name for it?
I think
Lauren?
it's the investigator. They're like, or the observer. So they really like information.
So if you have that observing posture, you might need to like withdraw to get a vantage point on that. You definitely need time to research and process. And then the 4 is I always think of like the moody artist, but that's not what it's labeled. but again, withdrawing. Then you have compliant type. So the 1 can look very assertive, but it's always like making sure that they're already on the side of what is good and right. So there's a sense of compliance to it. The 2 and the 6 also. So if you find yourself like looking at one of, or like between one of those 3, and you're like, I wonder why I can't find clarity. Like that at least puts you in a ballpark and maybe suggests to others to look at. So I wanted to share that with you too. All right, to your questions. Oh, Janie wants to know, who are famous fours?
Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. I'm going to get out this is the book I'm getting all of this out of too. It's like super, super awesome. There's just a lot here. So type 4, and so they talk about the wings too. So if you have a stronger 3 wing as a 4, then there are different examples than if you have a stronger 5 wing. And they identify the 4 with a 3 wing as the aristocrat.
Okay.
They give, let's see, Tennessee Williams, Judy Garland, Vivian Lee, Sarah McLachlan, Martha Graham, Jeremy Irons. I don't know all of those.
Jeremy Irons has an amazing role in the movie The Mission. Is that it? The Mission? Have you seen The Mission?
Sorry.
It's beautiful. The music is beautiful. I'll have to send you, it's a fabulous, fabulous movie. But Jeremy Irons, it's really old too. A young Robert De Niro plays a scoundrel, but it's really good.
That's great.
So that's good company.
Yeah, and when it's got a 5 wing, it's called the Bohemian, and Bob Dylan, Anne Rice, Edgar Allan Poe, Johnny Depp, James Dean, a lot of musicians and artists there. Yeah, there's a couple more, but yeah, definitely. I always think of 4 with the 5 wing as like being really intelligent and like extremely artistic. I don't know. It's just like, yeah.
So Zoe also on the Jeremy Irons thing reminds us that he's Scar in The Lion King. Very important.
Definitely.
And terrifying.
That helps me actually, because I have seen that one.
Feel free throughout to add your questions and observations. We're just going to keep the chat going. We'll revisit it with some minutes left at the end. So if you have anything that we can talk to today, or as Lauren was saying, that might be something that you'd like to explore once we're in the big group tomorrow night, feel free to throw those in. And let's see. So this is we're going to be looking at some of the things that just look at the Enneagrams in action, but we're also going to be looking at some of those social applications we talked about. And so this is maybe it's not really as obvious as Captain Obvious point number 1, but personality types get rewarded differently by different people, for different people by society, and can be conflated with identity and worthiness, etc. So we're just trying to and this doesn't map exactly onto the Enneagram, but it's another thing that can get in the way of understanding my type. So, and we talked about sort of the stereotypical male, the world's image, or especially westernized America's image of the successful man is an 8, an Enneagram 8. And so whatever number you have as a person who identifies with maleness, looking at the Enneagram, you're going to sort of subconsciously measure yourself over against your ability to conform to that pattern. And then where it says rewarded differently for different people, an 8 is a wonderful, wonderful type. If you are a male in society, you will be rewarded a lot. Some circles go so far as to label 8 the leader or boss instead of the challenger and protector. A huge disclaimer that I would want to put on there is that every number around the circle is capable of leading. We do not want to only have one kind of leader in the world. That would be just to embrace a poverty of imagination that doesn't fit. But a woman identifying in those same ways would not be as immediately embraced, in this country at least, displaying those same characteristics. So those are some of the things that we named a little bit last time that we want to explore in greater detail today. Women stereotypically are told that the form they're encouraged to inhabit and lean into is the 2, the servant, who thanklessly does a lot of things on the side and finds their own sense of worth and identity in that. But so if you find yourself in the same way that those withdrawn, compliant, and assertive triads kind of help us navigate commonalities, if you find yourself thinking, well, maybe I'm this, but I really feel this, it might be worth spending some time to kind of separate, like, why do I feel that? Where did that impetus come from? Were there certain messages in childhood or context where I learned that this kind of behavior was going to get me farther in whatever situation I found myself in? What would you add to that observation, Lauren?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with, gender specifically too. I think, I think even in, for women, I think especially sometimes in the church, and not necessarily just the church, but in like communities where we're taking care of others, and we like really try to make sure others are comfortable, but there's sort of this emphasis on that instead of taking care of self. And I know I've definitely had to unlearn some of that. Like, I need to make sure that I'm healthy in order to be there for others, and I still have to practice that for sure. But definitely when I looked at the Enneagram at the beginning and kind of the different labels, I think I immediately thought I was probably either a 2 or a 4 just from the labels. And then other women friends of mine were like, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely a 2, just on seeing the label before getting into like the meat of like, what does this actually mean? Because I think there is definitely an emphasis on that. And women who are really, really sure about knowing, and I'm even thinking about, I don't know if this actually fits, because I think it highlights other things, but sort of that like Karen idea that we're hearing about a lot. Like, I can speak to your manager. There's definitely like some privilege, I think, that's trying to be highlighted as well. But there is something that seems, I think, societally more offensive about a woman having that strong personality and sort of demanding things. I just found that fascinating, that that seems to bring up more than possibly a man doing that.
Absolutely. So we're going to look at some of those. We're going to start with some general Enneagram things, and then I've got a couple things to put in conversation with what Lauren just shared. I'm going to see if I can find it here real quick. Choo. Here we go. All right, this is a great, we talked about this last time. There are some really great Instagram resources, and this was one of my first ones that I fell in love with, called Enneagram and Coffee, and she's just doing a lot of really great stuff. But this is kind of a fun way to explore each Enneagram type in action. I'll show you some other formats of things that she shares. That for those of you who have, everybody has access to Enneagram, or not Enneagram, Instagram. You just don't know it probably. You don't have to sign up necessarily. If you look up Enneagram and Coffee and just in a Google search, she would come up. So this is each type. So one is, this is not an ordered list. This is Enneagram type list. So by Enneagram type, deeper questions. So if you were trying to like ask a question to someone in a way that connected to their sense of self and the things they value, the way they see the world, these are different questions you could ask. And Lauren, could you start us off, and we'll just like alternate through?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, when I was just like browsing through, I think these are kind of meant to sort of touch on those places where we're fearful of being not enough or loved. I think, is that kind of the idea?
Right.
Yeah.
These are questions that will kind of not make sense to an Enneagram type number at first, but really speak to that area that they denied themselves. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for the type 1, when was the last time you were really proud of yourself for something?
Remember that the 1s are notoriously critical, and they're judging themselves constantly. They come off as harsh, but they're so much harsher to themselves. So when was the last time? Yeah. 2s, what's something you need today? How can you give that to yourself?
Yeah. And I'm just thinking of the 2s that I love, who are, where they are needed, that's where they're loved. And so it can be so hard to turn that inward as well. Okay. So for the 3, When is the last time you were really happy?
That's getting at that sort of relentless drive to achieve? Is that what that's getting at, Lauren?
I think so. I actually recently talked with a 3 who was talking about really having a hard time with pessimism, feeling like other people were given opportunities much more easily than they were, like constantly working for this, achieving sort of a status where they can finally rest, which is the lie, right? Is that you probably will never feel like you've achieved enough, no matter what you've achieved.
Number 4, is there something you've been ashamed to tell people out of fear that they'd see you in the wrong way? Would you like to share that with me?
I wonder if it's like touching on that shame triad.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that shame triad is present in 2, 3, 4. And we'll talk about that too. Shame is a dynamic present in all of our lives and connects to all the different points, but is both just a crippling thing individually at its worst, also a powerful dynamic in society in some of these same things that we're talking about in terms of the larger issues.
Yeah. All right, 5, type 5. What feeling do you resist the most? Why do you think that's the case?
I love that because it puts a feeling question on a 5's own terms, which is, what do you think about it? Because 5s are happy to think about it, but that's brilliant.
Absolutely. And then it's that head triad, I guess, or the thinking triad.
Right.
There's more comfort in compartmentalizing up here before feeling it in the body.
Yeah. All right. So number 6, is there a desire you're ignoring out of fear of letting someone down? And so you can see there's a similarity in some of these, like the 2 and the 6 and that sort of thing. And just to kind of recap what we talked about last time, this is not so much, the Enneagram numbers are not so much about describing behaviors, but underlying motivations. So if you looked at those 2 and thought like, well, what's the difference? The 2 is going to have the shame they would be ashamed to have a need. The 6 is going to be driven by that fear of letting someone down. So that's just sort of helps me kind of expand my imagination for why each type even has a lot of variety within it, because it's not controlling the levers of behavior. It's really trying to get down to the level of the roots of like what motivates the behaviors we have.
All right, 7. What is your biggest emotional fear? What would happen if it came true? Woo.
All right, I wanted to ask you this. I'm not going to ask you that question, Lauren. How does that connect in a life-giving way? That just seems like the others kind of are like this, like gentle. That feels like a 7's nightmare.
Yeah, I'm actually, so this is kind of weird. Hopefully this isn't like too intense or too much personal stuff. I'll try to like be quick, but there was a period of time where I was having like panic attacks, which I'd never experienced. Totally a 7's nightmare. You're like trapped in this painful spot where you're like, I can't even pretend to be happy. I'm hyperventilating, whatever. And then there was, I had a really amazing therapist who was asking me to like lean in to the panic attack. This is all very intense stuff, but when I leaned in to it, I at first freaked out. Like, you don't want to accept when you feel that way. But with this other safe person, I just remember feeling like I kind of was able to like walk through it. And I actually felt like I was floating on the other side, which is sort of weird. And
wow.
But it was very like, I felt held and I felt safe afterward. That's the only time really I've been, at least, I've never been able to do that on my own. I think I've needed someone else to sort of hold a space for me where I feel like I'm not alone. But I think that fear of being alone in that pain and then getting trapped in it forever, that's something that I definitely experience. But that one, and this doesn't mean I feel like this all the time when I have anything painful come up, but sort of, I think, deciding to trust. I think what they're maybe getting at is, how do you trust getting through to the other side, and that this pain is not permanent, that you're not stuck in it forever. But yeah, it's kind of hard to, like, think about and process. Like, that's a very vulnerable place for me.
That one highlight, like, as you're answering that, I'm reading the little disclaimer off to the right, that these are questions where you have an established level of trust. So these can be mutual, which is important. So it's not one person trying to like fix another person, which I think is like where a lot of us go wrong in all of our relationships, is like viewing the other as an object for change at my hand. So like letting go of that. So reciprocal, mutual, and where there is an established level of trust, to realize that those friendships where you have that level of trust present sort of unique gifts and opportunities to go deeper with one another. All right, so number 8, why do you think you became so strong? That's also brilliant, because where the 5 is asking you to like think about your feelings, the 8 is asking someone to be vulnerable about their strength. 8s hate talking about vulnerability stereotypically and sort of at baseline. But to turn that into a vulnerable question is really beautiful.
Yeah. I know, I love that. And it's not, then it takes some of what could be so threatening just completely out of it. Yep. Well, not completely, but it softens so much. Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to read 9? Is that?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
9, what's your most controversial opinion? I promise not to be offended.
I'm so glad you asked, Lauren. I'm not going to answer that, because this context is not that like level of like that level of trust I have with you, not necessarily with a recorded thing.
Right.
That's a terrifying question. Is it not a terrifying question for everybody? Because what I'm trying to do by asking that question is illustrate the uniqueness of each Enneagram type. Like, when you see that, is it still a kind of scary question?
Yeah, it is. It is. But I think in a safe spot, it wouldn't be as scary. Like, if you were asking me this, I think I would be like, oh, actually, so yeah, I think I would have less difficulty leaning in with someone that really promises not to be offended. Yeah. So if it's someone I trust, I don't think I really feel that uncomfortable with it. But I imagine it would still be difficult as a 9.
I feel uncomfortable on 2 levels of it. Like, but I'm glad for it. So like, I would be glad to answer this in that trusting relationship. But it's a scary question, because really? And also, I'm not sure I could find it. And that's the 9's burying pattern, right? Like, it's not that I'm intentionally hiding anything from a group or from my friend. It's that I'm hiding it from myself. So I would have to like spend some time digging and be like, because 9s do not keep their controversial opinions close at hand, stereotypically, and without the good work that we're talking about. So I hope that, thank you for doing that one with me, Lauren. That was so fun. Would it be okay if we found another one?
Oh yeah, that's great.
Let's find another. If you see, all right, so I'm just scrolling down and you can see the different kinds of content here. This is Leanne and Michelle, whose video we're not that one, but we're going to do a video by them at our Wednesday night celebration. But if you see a title of those 9 types like that, that you like, Lauren, just call it out and we'll check it out real quick.
Okay.
And if you want to go back up, should we do in a Zoom meeting?
In a Zoom meeting.
Perfect. All right. I'll start since you started last time, and that way we'll get to read different numbers. All right. So in a Zoom meeting, number 1, the one who shows up early, prepared to take notes.
Yep.
You know who you are.
That's not me at all, but I know someone. 2, the one asking everyone how they're feeling right now.
They really want to make sure everybody's okay.
Yes.
And if there's anything they can do to make it better.
Yes.
which on Zoom must be excruciating because there's nothing you can do to make it better. I can't pour you coffee from...
One of those hilarious videos that Leanne and Michelle did that we are going to watch on Wednesday. It was just so funny when she was talking about being a 2 at the start of quarantine, that she just stood on a street corner and threw rolls of toilet paper at people. Like, I just don't want anyone to figure out what they need. Like,
I just want to help you. Stay still so I can help you. Number 3, the one analyzing how much more efficient this could have been done. Ooh. I feel your judgment, 3s.
Which is so funny because some of the 3s that I know too, it actually reminds me a little bit of the 1 in that they usually are incredibly efficient at the things they really care about, and they're very qualified. Like but they don't feel like they are. They're like hard on themselves about it too. And maybe those are just the 3s I know, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, number 4, the one who put thought into their backdrop. One of my friends who's also, I have a lot of 4 friends, but one of them, she has this desk that she set up for her Zoom meetings, and she has plants everywhere, like growing, living, beautiful, like she's just very much like, and this is my fig tree, and this is my beautiful whatever, I don't know any of the, but she can like label them all and talk about how they're important, and it's really sweet.
That's beautiful. Number 5, the one who doesn't speak the entire meeting until you bring up the one thing they want to talk about.
I think he's in a meeting right now. I haven't heard him talking at all, so.
One of the things I want to just like interject there, these like 1 through 9 things obviously are kind of tongue in cheek. They're not as deep as the books or other resources. They can help us do our own work, but I think the big can opener they can be for me is like we can see ourselves in them and laugh. And part of it is like, we've talked about this from the very beginning, the personality type is not the label that you want to like cling to and hold on to with a white knuckle fist. It's this thing to acknowledge and name, and then just kind of hold it lightly so that you can kind of move with more flexibility and range of motion. It's actually the labels, which is ironic because people see personality tests and sometimes they're concerned about the labels. The labels come in these other things we were talking about, like, well, you're a white man in this country, so step up and do these really destructive patterns of behavior that are ignorant of your privilege or whatever else, because for reasons, right? Those are the labels. We want to give ourselves permission to be the selves that God has made. And laughter can be a real gift toward that. So that's my little disclaimer.
Absolutely. And I think also, I don't know why I just thought of this, but it just came up for me that, you know, if you are a woman that's a 2 or a man that's an 8, and that is really true for you, especially a healthy version of that is such a gift.
Yes.
It's, you know, and I know a really healthy female too, who like really embraces that part of herself in a healthy way. But it is fascinating, I think, just the patterns of like feeling pushed into that, if that's not truly who you are created to be.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
So 6, the one who asks the clarifying questions. I have a 6 friend who that's all she does. And I'm so grateful, because I would never have thought to ask those clarifying questions. And then it happens. I don't know if it's been in a Zoom meeting, but just in like general, in groups.
Yeah. 7, the one who's drinking wine out of a pomegranate juice bottle.
Let me just, it's hidden over here now.
I saw this how-to video the other day of a 90-year-old woman with a syringe injecting vodka into a Capri Sun bag, and then with a lighter, like sealing it shut.
Wow.
She must be a 7.
She must be. It's so funny. I do notice, like, especially on, like in Zoom meetings, that go for like a really long time, or if I'm not really required to do a lot of interaction, like if there's not a lot of interaction, if it's more like lecture-y kind of thing, I mean, I guess just in general, I try to like keep it fun. Like I'll be, like, I guess our first session that we had for this, like I wore my Christmas sweater and like, I'm usually drinking coffee. Like if I don't have something else kind of going on and I'm not really engaged, it's super hard to stay present. Oh, is it my turn? Yep, it is. Sorry.
Oh, it is.
Number 8, the one doing 3 other things while also meeting.
Which is cool. And full disclaimer, like people can tell, right? Like if I do Alt Tab enough times, I'll see that you'll see my complexion change. I'm not a chameleon. That's because I'm looking at different things. Or for the 8 who has like their phone just out of view. And so it's fun. And an 8 is able to be present too. So, but you just have to like talk about norms, social norms, all that kind of stuff. And then finally the 9, the one who's wearing pajamas on the bottom, a professional shirt on top. I'm not going to stand up for you right now. All right, so there are lots of resources like this. Enneagram and Coffee is a good one. And you can kind of like, again, just get like those snapshots. I found this, I've said this before, but like with the books, I really enjoyed those for getting to know more about myself because I'm as vain as everybody. But with these, it really helps me get just like a snapshot. It's almost like flashcards for understanding other people and the ways that different people would show up differently in the same situation.
Yeah.
So it is kind of fun practice that way.
It's interesting too when like you notice that for some of these flashcard kind of things like you were talking about, it is interesting to see that some of the things that they're joking about might be a little bit less healthy version of that number, and it's kind of like poking fun, or is something that just doesn't quite resonate with your number. Like I know there have been times where both Ryan and I have been like, oh, that doesn't really fit for me. That's interesting. But we can imagine that it would maybe for that type of a different, I don't know, something different. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now we're looking at, this is a transition to some of our applications around race and also gender. So this is Willie Jennings, who's a fabulous, I want to make sure I've got the sound on. I do. He's a fabulous theologian. He was academic dean at Duke when I was there. Now he's at Yale. He's at Fuller in this video, talking about the different kinds of, he's talking about personality. He's not talking about Enneagram, but he's talking about personality as these things that we feel like we are obligated to perform a certain way. And that is kind of this mentality that undergirds sort of ideas of whiteness in this country, and the fact that certain spaces have a kind of like doors cut out in certain shapes, but how that also happens with respect to gender. So we're listening to him for a couple minutes here talk about the gender question.
There are several questions that can be tied together, but there's one that I want to prioritize. How does gender interact with your definition of whiteness?
Yes. The move toward maturity is the move toward being a mature man. There's no doubt about that. It is to be able, I'm working on a small book for theological education. The fundamental problem we face within, we didn't talk about education because couldn't fit that in with giving it everything else going on. But one of the fundamental problem we face is that most higher education in America is shaped inside one trajectory: the formation of us all into self-sufficient men. And so masculinity stands at the end of the accomplishment of maturity. To be able to stand self-sufficiently, independently, knowing your own voice. We give other kinds of clothing to this, but in truth, it's a beautiful masculinity that's very seductive. And just like anyone can be white, anybody can be a man. It's not just men who can be men. And not just white men who are pressed into a persona, because it is a persona. It's not, it's not the actuality of it. It can be, but it's a persona. But anybody can step inside that persona. And the tragedy is, for so many people, they don't know it's a persona. They think it's what God created.
So I just wanted to share those couple of minutes. And Lauren, interested in your kind of thoughts, observations there. That is beautiful in that it talks about like the self-sufficiency, the independence, the things that cut us off from relationship, how our different personalities, however we understand them, each one has different obstacles to connecting that are really important to name for what they are.
Yeah. I mean, it's so striking to me. And this could be kind of my own personal journey with all of, I don't know, re-examining certain systems and how some people it works for them so well, or it's grounding or empowering for some, and then it's sort of like a prison or a cage for others. But how there is, as humans, I think generally speaking, at least I know I really want connection. And so I think some of that, the pressure to conform to some of those, I mean, just even some of the ways we're raised with what's a good thing to do, what's a bad thing to, I think we want to be good or seen as good or seen as successful or whatever that is internally, that to keep us connected, which kind of goes back to how am I valued, how am I loved, where am I safe, in the Enneagram. And so I think stepping into personas or into lives that are really not our own or internally what we would wish for ourselves or how we were created, I think it's super tempting. And I think probably most people fall into that in more than one way throughout their lives.
It also makes me think of theologian Stanley Hauerwas would talk about this a lot. The story that each of us must be our own self independent of others, and that's how we're going to know who our true self is most, is a story we did not come up with on our own. Other people told you that or told me that. So we always belong to a story. The question is not, can you live your life not belonging to a story? The story, because even that sort of lie of individualism of the self-made, in this case, man, is not an individual story. The question isn't, do you belong to a story, but which story do you belong to? And one of the things that Jennings says later is our ideas about these things can become like a container that we try to fit the gospel into. And the gospel can only fit the size and shape of that container. But if we put that container down and instead start with the gospel as this thing, and then allow our understanding of what it means to be made in the image of God, male and female, he created them, all that, allow that to fill into the generous space of the gospel, the conversation changes. And that's one of the long, hard social projects for the church, is to kind of constantly say, where has our imagination for what it is to be Christian been fit into another story, instead of letting the story of the gospel be the largest story, our largest context. I want to close that out real quick and share just briefly, and don't let this title throw you. It's a really important thing. We looked at this at a staff meeting recently, the characteristics of white supremacy culture. And it's another example of the size of the containers, but the containers don't come with labels that say this is a toxic label, right? You just take the individualism, the idea that I should live a life that doesn't need anybody. It doesn't come with a toxic label or whatever. So this is showing how things that can contribute to a white supremacy culture actually hurt all of us and don't come with the right labels. And so they can seem invisible most of the time. Would you read, Lauren, that first paragraph in that?
Yeah. Yeah, here, I'm sorry, I'm gonna move this little bar. Okay. Below is a list of characteristics of white supremacy culture which show up in our organizations. Culture is powerful precisely because it is so present and at the same time so very difficult to name or identify. The characteristics listed below are damaging because they are used as norms and standards without being proactively named or chosen by the group. They're damaging because they promote white supremacy thinking. They're damaging to both people of color and to white people. Organizations that are people of color led or a majority people of color can also demonstrate many damaging characteristics of white supremacy culture.
Thanks, Lauren. What I love about this list that follows is it doesn't have any, it reads like a list of Enneagram tendencies. So it kind of, for me, highlights that each personality type has something to name and be mindful for ourselves, because we are creating a shaped door for relationship that doesn't fit a lot of people, not just communities of color, but oftentimes, especially communities of color. So perfectionism, little appreciation expressed among people for the work they're doing. It's more common to point out how a person is or work is inadequate. Mistakes are seen as personal. I'm skimming, I'm not reading one by one. Making a mistake confused with being a mistake. You can see all of the agony of the one in that culture, where like there's one way to do it and you're not doing it. A 9 knows that one's foolish, because a 9 doesn't believe there's only one way to do it. So a 9 can be a can opener for this one, but there will be other blind spots that a 9 would have as we kind of like skim down the list. An antidote here is to develop a culture of appreciation. Gratitude is such a gift, not just for our own selves, but for every culture which we are a part. And I think that's another example where our faith can be such a tremendous gift, because after all, when we get together, it's called the Great Thanksgiving. We're supposed to be the best at giving thanks, or not in the best sense, but you know what I mean. We get a lot of practice at it. Sense of urgency. This reminds me of a 3 with their emphasis on efficiency. But continued sense of urgency that makes it difficult to take time to be inclusive, to encourage democratic and or thoughtful decision making, to think long-term, to consider consequences, frequently results in sacrificing potential allies for quick or highly visible results. That says 3 all over, right? Antidotes, realistic work plans, leadership that understands that things take longer than anyone expects. Defensiveness, the organizational structure is set up and much energy is spent trying to prevent abuse and protect power as it exists. 8s need to like look out for this. Like if you are the protector and the challenger, then people who suggest that you might not be protecting or challenging in a way that is good for everyone, that will make you feel defensive, likely, not always. Antidotes, understanding that structure cannot in and of itself facilitate or prevent abuse. Understand the link between defensiveness and fear. Work on your own defensiveness. Quantity over quality. Worship of the written word. So this goes for our note takers and that kind of thing. Any place where we kind of squeeze the grace out of life. And I'm just kind of going down here. We can make this available for those who'd like to read it. I want to respect our time though. Either or thinking. And I think the fear and open conflict is where I wanted to at least get to the part where the 9, I didn't want to let myself off the hook, but the tendency to like smooth things over or remain silent, avoid the conflict. That's a 6, that's a 9, that's a couple of the different types. That doesn't mean that each of these types is racist in a kind of absolute sense. Brene Brown recently shared something that's really, really helpful, I think. She doesn't like using racist as a label or a name that applies to people, because, and this is a point, and I'll pull this down now. This is a point that that goes to what we've been talking about with that shame triad. she says shame is the ultimate tool of the oppressor in the status quo because it doesn't leave any room for change. So instead of saying, wow, I'm a 9, I was silent, someone calls me a racist, and all of a sudden I freeze. Instead, like, wow, it feels like there's some racist thought happening in this room. It's so much like the Enneagram in that we're separating out identity from behaviors. And that allows us to notice, and the point in sharing that was to kind of like allow us to notice in a way that connects to our own tendencies or blind spots, and then be able to aim for less racist or anti-racist behaviors without being so preoccupied with whether or not I get labeled, because that really just makes the story about me. And that's not helpful to the sort of larger cause and larger project. So that's, I want to shut up and hear what you think about all that, Lauren. But that's like one of the really important social moves, along with gender, because it's one thing to kind of understand ourselves. It's another to kind of see where the larger social currents would take us, and different things that will be important for each type to kind of bear in mind as we swim in those waters.
Yeah, no, I remember when you brought this to staff meeting, and it was really eye-opening for me because, honestly, so many, I think just in our society, there are certain things that I have absorbed. Like I do have a note on the bathroom mirror that says it's good to make mistakes, changing it from it's okay to make mistakes. And actually it was like kiddos that taught me that in play therapy of like, hey, that's how you learn. And being able to say, oh, in here, it's okay to make mistakes. Will really like everywhere. It would be so beautiful if it was okay to make mistakes, because that's something that I don't think I learned from a lot of the societies that I lived in. And so there was a lot of like, and actually in most of those things, defensiveness, individualism, stuff like that, I think they are all connected to things I've experienced in society that I didn't even realize I was absorbing, that I'll fall into for sure, and have to actually practice sort of unlearning those things.
And you have a great saying about unlearning. You bring up unlearning a lot, not just like our project is to learn, our project is also to unlearn.
Yeah, no, I think part of it's the gift that some of the systems that I've been in have really not worked well for me. So to be able to learn that while they may be helpful for some, they're not helpful for all. And I work with so many, I think part of it is just having a bigger heart for myself as a younger person, working with a lot of people, just a lot of kids, adolescents, adults who think the problem is with them rather than with the systems that they are in. And the more I work with them and the more I realize like, wow, you have this beautiful, creative ADHD brain, but you don't fit in this kind of a classroom community. Right. Like, it doesn't work for you. That kid might grow up thinking like, I'm bad or I'm broken. I have to take pills to adjust to this. And right now, the way that I mostly see it is I've spent so much time unlearning that I am not necessarily the problem. Maybe I am in some circumstances, but there's more to it than that.
Absolutely. And that's maybe a really great place for us to, for sure, we're going to get to your questions. We have a couple of really good ones. And if you still have ones or want to put them in the chat box now, absolutely. We'll segue to questions in a second, but a good place for us to end our kind of formal ramblings for today, because of the interconnectedness that you're naming, right? Like, being present to myself doesn't just involve myself. I've become aware of the cultural stuff that maybe shapes me more than I shape me, and I don't have much say in certain things. I have ability to grow in my awareness and in other things. It makes me mindful of the importance of addressing social changes as social changes, and not just like, let's make sure every individual is thinking the right thing, because there's still these structures that are moving that can shape us. And and more positively, and kind of where we began the whole 3-step. I mean, not that social change isn't positive, it's just really daunting. But that's the 9 coming out of me. It feels very daunting. As a also, we get to know ourselves best as we know ourselves in community, and healthy community, thriving community. Where you like to talk about unlearning, I like to talk about you can't know yourself by yourself. And it's one of the gifts of understanding, like the prayer book says, that our lives depend upon each other's toil, and in so many more ways than we will ever be able to see or imagine.
I love that. And I'm not sure who the quote is by, so I feel a little bad, but it does stick out in my brain right now of is something I just love and resonate with so much. And it's, we were wounded relationally, and we will also heal relationally. And I think especially in our communities, yeah.
Social distance. I love that quote.
Yeah, it really speaks to me, because that has been so true in my life. And like we've said, like, you know, none of us don't have wounds from others. To be in community is to wound one another, and also to repair and to heal and to grow, and it just can be very immensely rich.
Amen. All right, so easy questions from our chat room. Softball question. What number do you think Jesus would be?
Hang on, I think he's listed as a 9 here.
He's listed as a 9? Of course he is.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, maybe he's not in here. I feel like I heard that somewhere though.
If Jesus were a 9, he'd be a very healthy 9. Because he flips tables. He doesn't avoid conflict. He's always like saying offensive things to people. And I'm like, don't say that. One of the most offensive things he says in the Bible to me as a 9 was when he sees you've got a blind beggar calling out from the roadside, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And he goes up to him and he's like, what do you want me to do for you? And I'm like, oh, Jesus, that's so embarrassing. You should know because you're Jesus. But spending some time with that passage became a really great gift and a really great reminder that, like, pastoral relationships, therapeutic relationships never stop being about giving voice to the person, or not even giving voice, helping the person find their voice, and entering into relationships of clarified consent and all of that. I think it's such a gift to not have to know how to be, but to trust that the other person knows what they need on some level.
Yeah. Well, actually, it kind of makes sense that, I guess, as the 9 being in touch with the anger in a good way, like pointing you to justice or whatever. I can totally see Jesus as being a 9, maybe. I don't know. I feel like hopefully it's not.
You know what? All right, so this would be fun. And maybe this is a homework assignment for our Wednesday night group for those who want to do it. Make the case for Jesus as any Enneagram type, as long as you use some kind of scriptural justification. Because let's be clear, like, God does not need our protection from, but like, I was like, because just as you were saying that, I was like, if Jesus was a 7, what would he have said? And he said one time, he's like, I don't get it, y'all. John the Baptist came, then he fasted, gave up booze, all this stuff, and you guys didn't listen to him. I come eating and drinking and having a good time, throwing lots of parties, and you don't listen to me either. Like, which is it? So I'm like, oh, maybe Jesus is a 7.
That first miracle was the wine one, wasn't it?
Which is not, I mean, I feel like wine has come up a couple times for 7s. That's not true or accurate, but the whole idea of being the life of the party.
And also, I think escaping pain. So, like, they talk about, actually, in one of my books, like, substance abuse, and, like, anyone obviously can fall into that, but, like, 7s, that desire to escape pain is, like, pretty strong. So,
yeah,
we're like, oh, let's party, let's drink, let's not feel the bad feelings. Like, I think that's just sort of a stereotypical, maybe not so healthy 7.
So if you want to bring some kind of scriptural support for your answer to Sheila's question, what number do you think Jesus would be for our party on Wednesday? And then Kevin says, this is an observation. He said, I think I specified on my registration, and Kevin is coming in as someone new to the Enneagram, that I would have a lot of questions once we got going. He now sees that he's a 6. He's like, kind of funny how that worked out. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that it resonated with you quickly, because that can be really fun then to dig deeper into that. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are at the end of our time. Lauren, this has been a pleasure as always. Everybody, thank you for your participation, for your questions. We're really looking forward to tomorrow night. You have the link. We'll send you any additional information we need to, but I think just show up and we'll watch a video and we'll speculate about Jesus's Enneagram type, and we'll just address anything that's on your mind as a result of these 3 sessions together. We don't really have, we have things we can talk about. We don't have a formal agenda. We really want it to be about connecting with the community that's made this journey together. So that's the plan.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really excited. Sheila, bring your wine. It is 7 o'clock, and you know.
That's right. That's right. Time change. So it's 7 o'clock for tomorrow. Well, it'll be an evening affair. All right. Take care, friends, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks,
Peace.
all.